yesterday, day before yesterday, we looked at the history, right? Because that was important. The historical background of Isaiah, kings, Uzziah, right? Uzziah is an important person when you study Isaiah, because Israel is divided. Jeroboam II was ruling the northern part of Israel, and Uzziah was ruling the southern part of Israel, right? Judah. And Assyrian kings and kingdoms, right? That's what we need to know. Tiglath-Pileser, or another name is Paul. He attacked, and we read the history. I'm not going to talk about that. But in 734, I just want to remind you, Tiglath initiated a second campaign to consolidate previous gains and expand beyond the territories, chafing under the heavy tribute executed by the Assyrian monarch. Number of small states, including Syria, right? Syria was ruled under Rezin, and Israel was under Pekah when Tiglath-Pileser was ruling. So these two names are important, right? Rezin and Pekah, right? Israel, the northern kingdom, was ruled by Pekah now, and Syria was ruled by Rezin, right? Those two names are important. Remember. Then we have another ruler from Syria, Shalmaneser V came. Not Syria, from Assyria. And another ruler after Shalmaneser V, we saw Sargon II, right? And finally, we also saw Sennacherib, right? Another Assyrian ruler, right? Their names are important in studying. Right, now let's go to the interpretive issues from Isaiah. That's what my focus today. All right. Interpretive issue is related to Isaiah 7:14. So let us look into Isaiah 7:14. Okay. Isaiah 7:14. So can one of you please read for me these words? Isaiah 7:14. Famous passage. Anyone? Isaiah 7:14.
Is my line still breaking?
Go ahead. Okay, Joseph, go ahead. Joseph.
It will give you a sign. The virgin will be with the child and will give birth to a son. Will call him Immanuel.
All right. All right. You know this verse. Therefore, the Lord himself give you a sign. The virgin will be with a child and will give a birth to a son. And they will call him Immanuel. Well, if you look at that passage right there is not much a problem. But, so, it's easy to interpret. But when you look at verse 15, we may have some trouble. Let's look at verse 15. Verse 15. Can we read verse 15 also? Joseph?
Yes, possible. Verse 15, he will eat curds and honey, knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right.
All right. That's enough. That's enough. When you interpret, we need to interpret according to the context. So let's look at the issue with this passage, the Immanuel passage in Isaiah. There is a considerable debate over the meaning of Immanuel prophecy in Isaiah 7:14 and its use in Matthew 1:23. In Isaiah 7 verse 1, Ahaz, remember? We learned about Ahaz of Ahaz was ruling in 735 to 750 BC of the southern kingdom. Ahaz the king. He is confronted in 734 BC, right? So Ahaz was ruling in the beginning of his ruling time. He was confronted. He was confronted by a combined force from Rezin. Remember Rezin? He is from the Syria. And Pekah. Remember Pekah? He is the king of the northern kingdom, like Israel. So remember three kings. Ahaz and Pekah were ruling Israel in a way. Pekah was ruling the northern kingdom, and Ahaz was ruling the southern kingdom. And you have now Rezin is actually coming from Syria, right? Syria. So these people are ruling, and Ahaz was confronted by these two kings, Pekah and Rezin. The two kings had previously formed a coalition for the purpose of throwing off Assyrian dominance. If you look at, I can maybe show you one more time the history that we looked at to give you exactly what we are talking here. It was under Tiglath-Pileser, remember? Tiglath-Pileser III, right? Who was ruling Assyria, right? And during his time, you have Rezin and Pekah are coming, and we saw Ahaz also ruling Judah, right? So we saw this one. So it is Tiglath-Pileser who was ruling Assyria. That is important to note here. All right. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going ahead. Now, okay, what is happening? So Pekah and Rezin wants to depose Ahaz. Ahaz apparently had rejected their overture to join them. In response, coalition had sent their combined forces against Jerusalem in effort to depose Ahaz and force southern kingdom into joining this alliance of Syria and the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, the motive behind this incursion, it may be assumed, was twofold. By having the southern kingdom as a part of the coalition, it would enhance coalition's chance against Assyria. And at the same time, it would provide a buffer for the coalition's southern flank in case Egypt thought to take advantage of the political instability of the region. So they were thinking, okay, if we have Jerusalem and Judah as part of our coalition, Egypt from the south west will not come, or we have added force now. In order to alleviate Ahaz's concern about the forces arrayed against him, God sent Isaiah with a message of hope. Now, we are looking at the context of this verse in order to understand. So I want you to listen carefully what we are talking here. So Ahaz is in a dilemma. Now there is a force, the northern kingdom and Syria, Rezin and Pekah are coming to depose Ahaz because Ahaz will not join them. But they're coming and he's concerned, right? He's afraid actually. He thinks that maybe they might defeat us. So Ahaz is a little bit afraid. So God is sending Isaiah to to King Ahaz. God is there. So Isaiah promised Ahaz that God would intervene on his behalf and destroy the two kings opposing him. Right? So let's look at it. Isaiah 7, now the passage we read. Let's read Isaiah 7 verse 7. What is 7 verse 7 says? Yet, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. Verse 8 says, for the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. So God says, it will not happen. Right? Isaiah is prophesying. Isaiah then directed Ahaz to seek a sign from God. Isaiah says to Ahaz, you seek a sign from God. Why don't you ask for a sign to the Lord, Ahaz? Maybe a miraculous sign, no problem. That would serve as a confirmation of God's promise. Look at verse 11. Verse 11. Isaiah says to Ahaz, ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or in the highest heights. Right? But what is the story? Ahaz refused to ask for a sign, ostensibly to avoid putting God to test. Verse 12. Look at verse 12. But Ahaz said, I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test, because Deuteronomy 6:16 clearly says, do not test God. Right? Do not test. Right? So Isaiah said, you ask for a sign. Ahaz says, no, I will not. I will not ask for a sign, because I will not test God. What happens? Isaiah rebuked Ahaz for his obduracy and said that God would give a sign to Ahaz regardless. Regardless whether you ask or not, God is going to give you a sign, Ahaz. Ahaz said, I will not ask. Then Isaiah said, no, you are going to get a sign. What is the sign? Sign was that a virgin would conceive and bring forth a son who would be called Immanuel. And before the son reached the age where he is able to tell the right from wrong, these two kings and their kingdoms would be destroyed. Right? So what did we read? This is what we read before. So verse 15 and 16. Let me read the verse 14 to 16 one more time for our understanding. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign, talking to Ahaz. But is it Ahaz? We'll say it. The virgin will be with the child and will give birth to a son. And will call him Immanuel. Verse 15, he will eat curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. Like basically says, when he knows, he's able to know what is right and wrong. Verse 16, but before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings, that is, northern kingdom and Syria, two kings, you dread will be laid waste. Right? That's what the verse says. So, what are we reading here? They will be destroyed. The sign is directly linked to God's promise of deliverance, which in turn is linked to the threat facing the southern kingdom, that is Judah. So, the sign is given to Ahaz, ruling at the time of Isaiah. Right? Sign is given to Ahaz. And it says, before the boy is able to choose right from wrong, before that comes, these two kingdom will be destroyed. So the question is this sign, the Son, a reference to Jesus Christ? That is a simple question. Is it a reference to Jesus Christ? Is this Immanuel a reference to Jesus Christ? That is our problem now. Because clearly in the context, the sign is given to Ahaz. And the point is that a son is going to be given Ahaz. Virgin is going to give birth to a son. And the son, before he becomes mature, even before he becomes mature, the two kingdoms will be destroyed. So how can this be a reference to Jesus Christ? Right? That's a simple question. Now, what Matthew does, Gospel of Matthew, Matthew's application of the prophecy to Mary and Jesus. So Matthew says, this virgin is Mary, this son is Jesus. Is his use of the fulfillment formula. Little doubt how Matthew interpreted Isaiah's words. Mary was the virgin prophesied by Isaiah, and Jesus was the child, the son. Moreover, Matthew clearly understood virgin in the technical sense, right? What is that? Parthenon. Okay, let me put that into Greek properly. Yes. Yes. Parthenos, right? So Matthew is using the word virgin in the technical sense. What is the technical sense? He used the unambiguous Greek for virgin, as you see it in the Septuagint as well. Parthenos. He carefully identified the Holy Spirit as the source of her conception. So that's a technical term, that this is virgin bearing a son. It's simply, yes, virgin means not unmarried, but here is someone, it's not talking about a young woman, but it is simply talking about really a virgin conceiving a child. He stated that she remained a virgin throughout her pregnancy. And after the birth of her child, we read that he had she experienced sexual relations with her husband, Joseph, in Matthew 1:35. So Matthew is using a term that clearly tells that this is talking about Mary, the virgin is Mary, and the son is Jesus. And Matthew used the word Parthenos to say, technical terms to say, this is not talking about a virgin who married and having a baby, but it is talking about or a young woman who is married and having a child. No, this is talking about a virgin without a man conceiving. The crucial question with this passage is to explain how the birth of Jesus fulfilled in Isaiah's prophecy. The problem comes in harmonizing Isaiah 7:14 as a sign to Ahaz in the 8th century BC, and Matthew's use of it as a reference to Jesus, which actually in the 1st century, right? Attempts at solution generally have fallen under one of three approaches. So how are we going to look at this passage, and how are we going to understand this passage? That is our question. There are three ways you can interpret this passage. There are three ways people interpret. Number one, There are those who take the prophecy exclusively as historical. For example, the child about whom Isaiah spoke was born shortly after the prophecy. Yeah, it is a historical. When the child was born right after Isaiah prophesied, so the young woman generally understood to be a virgin at the time of prophecy, married and gave birth to a son. At the time of prophecy, she was a virgin. She was married, gave birth to a son. Some identify the virgin here is actually Isaiah's wife. Actually, a second wife in order for her to be a virgin at the time of prophecy. Right? So, and the son is Maher-shalal Hashbaz. You read that son in Isaiah 8 verse 3. Maher-shalal Hashbaz. So the virgin is Isaiah's second wife. The son is Maher-shalal Hashbaz. That is a son. The virgin gave birth to a son. Others taking virgin to mean simply a younger woman opt for the virgin to be Ahaz's wife, right? So those who believe prophecy and fulfillment as historical, some others believe, no, this virgin is actually young woman, not necessarily to be an unmarried, not necessarily to be a virgin. It simply talks about young woman, and it is actually Ahaz's wife, Abi. And the son is Ahaz's son, Hezekiah. Hezekiah is the son. So you read about him in 2 Kings. Remember Hezekiah. Hezekiah was the son of Ahaz, born in Abi. So that's the first approach. So the prophecy is completely historical in nature. Prophecy has to be understood. It could be either Isaiah's son or Ahaz's son. The first approach. Second approach. Second approach is to take the prophecy as exclusively messianic. Messianic. This is messianic. That means the virgin is Mary and son is Jesus. What Isaiah is talking about, Mary and Jesus. Those who holding to this interpretation do not see Isaiah a sign as having direct bearing on Ahaz's immediate circumstances. Those who believe that this is, Isaiah is talking about Mary and Jesus, they don't see any connection on Ahaz's immediate circumstances. No bearing on that. This is talking about future. We'll look at that as we progress. Third approach. Third approach is to combine the first two and to see something of a double fulfillment involving sensus plenior. Yeah, that means there some people think that there is a double fulfillment. Initial fulfillment was in Ahaz's day, and double fulfillment, so there should be a second fulfillment that is in Jesus' day. So there are some people believe that this is combining of the two approaches above historical plus Jesus, so there is a double fulfillment. One is fulfilled in Ahaz's day, the other is fulfillment in Jesus' day. Before addressing this solution, a note is in order to regarding the term virgin. Before we talk about the issues, we need to know about virgin. It is often argued that the word used here is alma in Hebrew. Alma does not mean virgin in a technical sense, but a young woman. Right? So it is often argued that alma doesn't mean a virgin. Simply, it means a young woman. Furthermore, Isaiah Isaiah intended the idea of virgin, he should have or would have used the unambiguous expression Batullah. Batullah. So if really Isaiah was intending clearly an unmarried virgin, Batullah should be used. Evaluation of the Old Testament evidence, however, does not support these contentions at all. For example, the Alma with the meaning of virgin fits all 7 of its uses in the Old Testament. So, this word Alma is used 7 times in the Old Testament. I have given the verses here, right? And can be denied in none of them, the virgin. So it is used 7 other times. I don't think you can say this is simply talking about a young woman. No. In all other references, it is talking about unmarried virgin. Unmarried virgin. Furthermore, Batullah, used over 50 times in the Old Testament, is not the unambiguous term for virgin. So it is often qualified by some additional comments to indicate the meaning. Thus, the prophet selected the Alma over Batullah to communicate more precisely meaning intended by the prophecy, that is, unmarried virgin. Right. Having said this, all 3 of the above views meet insurmountable problems. The exclusively historical approach robs the promise in verse 14 of any literal sense. For example, there was no virgin conception or birth in Ahaz's day. If you take it as completely historical, then there is a problem. What is the first problem? There was no virgin conception or virgin giving birth in Ahaz's day. Hezekiah, on the other hand, was at least 8 years old when Ahaz ascended to the throne. So there is no way that it can fulfill to Ahaz because Hezekiah was already born. Now, you're talking about Isaiah's son, Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. On the other hand, was probably the second son of Isaiah's first wife. It's not the second wife, it is actually second son. And Isaiah had only one wife. Nor in any case was there one born who was truly God with us. Whether Maher-shalal-Hashbaz or Hezekiah was never been identified as Immanuel. God with us, never been. So the exclusively future interpretation rules out any now. So historical interpretation doesn't work because Hezekiah or Maher-shalal-Hashbaz was no way, never been identified as Immanuel, God with us. So that is what? The historical interpretation. That is a problem with the historical interpretation. Now, if you say, what Isaiah is completely speaking is about Mary and Jesus, that means completely future. The exclusive future interpretation rules out any sign for Ahaz. Now, if Isaiah is simply speaking about Jesus and Mary, what Jesus and Mary has to do with Ahaz, who is ruling in the 8th century, seemingly contradicting verse 10 to 16. It is out of context. This verse suggests that there is some sense in which this prophecy is a sign to Ahaz in the immediate context. Furthermore, verse 15 mentions this child eating curds and honey. What about that with Jesus? So that is generally understood as a reference to the period of harsh conditions brought about by invading army. Eating curds and honey tells about the difficult time that this boy will go through because of an invading army. How does this relate to Jesus? For the matter, the following verse, which addresses the demise of Syro-Ephraimite collision, because Jesus' time you don't have this collision at all. So the third approach, second approach, completely future, also has a problem. That means now the next option is the third approach. So what is the third approach? Which combines the first two. It violates the principles of the univocal nature of language. If you take if you take double fulfillment, it violates the universal nature of language, the single meaning of scripture, the authorial intent. Because there is no way one verse can have two meanings. That is wrong exegesis. It is a wrong interpretation. So combining of the previous two views must give different meanings to the words in Isaiah's prophecy in order for the prophecy to be applied both to a child in Ahaz's day and to Jesus. Either the woman was virgin or she was. Either the son was Jesus or someone else. Either the child was literally God with us or child was not. That's what we understand. That's what we should understand. So here is the solution. Solution to the problem. Right. The best solution is to see Isaiah giving one sign with two parts. All right. Isaiah is giving one sign with the two parts. The two parts representing twofold threat to the house of David. Not only was Ahaz personally being threatened in verse 6, but the Davidic line was being threatened, and therefore Davidic promises as well. Let me take you one more time to verse 6. All right. Verse 6 says, let us invade Judah. Who is saying? Rezin and Pekah. Let us invade Judah. Let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves and make the son of Tabeel king over it. What was the threat? The threat was against Judah. Ahaz is the ruler of Judah. He is sitting on which throne? He is sitting on a Davidic throne. God said to David, David, your throne will be forever. Your son your descendant will rule forever. So when Rezin and Pekah came and wanted to invade Judah, dethrone Ahaz, it was actually Davidic line was threatened. And therefore, the threat was against the Davidic promises. So what Isaiah prophesies? Isaiah, first part of the sign, addresses the concern with the Davidic line and was for the entire house of David, which Ahaz represented, because Ahaz is sitting on Davidic throne. Therefore, the entire throne was threatened. It encompasses the prophecy in verse 13 to 14 of a virgin conceiving and giving birth to a son called Immanuel, and involves a far fulfillment. Remember, we talked about near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. We did not talk about double fulfillment. We did not. We don't believe in double fulfillment. We believe, yes, there are certain prophecy fulfilled at the time of writing or prophesying, and other prophecy being fulfilled in the future. That is what a far fulfillment. According to Matthew, prophecy is speaking specifically of Mary's miraculous conception and the birth of Jesus. Such an interpretation is consistent with what Isaiah says elsewhere about the child. As such, this part of the sign does not function as a confirmation of Ahaz's promised deliverance from two kings opposing him. Rather, it serves as a sign to the house of David, right? So if you look at, yes, it is. Verse 13 says, Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of David." Look at that. Look at the prophecy that Isaiah is saying. Verse 13, clearly Isaiah is looking at the house of David, not simply Ahaz. But of course, it is Ahaz represents now the house of David, of God's preservation of Davidic line and fulfillment of Davidic promises. So if you look at verse 13, it is clearly not simply Ahaz, but Davidic line. So that sign is clearly not to simply Ahaz, but it is far in nature. Far in nature. It is a Davidic line. So verse 13 and 14 is connected to Davidic throne and Davidic line here, or Davidic house of David. The second part of the sign, that is verse 15 to 16, is specifically for Ahaz. Ahaz. How do you know? If you really look at the grammar, you will know. For example, let's look at again this passage. Look at again in this passage, verse 13 and 14. Then Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of Israel, you house of Israel, or house of David. Is it enough to try the patience of man? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, God, the Lord himself will give you," in Hebrew, all this "you" is plural. You is plural. That means this is talking about the entire house of David. Israel. To the Israel. Sign is for the Israel. And it says the virgin will, the child will give birth to a son, and he will call Immanuel. So verse 13 to 14 is plural, whereas you in verse 16, the Lord will bring you, or you is singular. That is connected to Ahaz. So the aspect of the sign involves the time period between the birth of this son and the age at which he would be able to discern good and evil, and has a near fulfillment. The expression 7:14 is literally, "Behold, a virgin is pregnant and will bring forth a sign." So, in other words, Isaiah's statement depicted a virgin as already pregnant. Already pregnant. That is what we understand. And verse 13 and 14, the you is plural, whereas verse 16 is singular. So how should we understand? Right, let's come to the conclusion. In the context of the sign, Isaiah declared what would take place were the child born in Ahaz's day. Right? In the context of the sign, Isaiah declared what would take place were the child born in Ahaz's day. If the child was born in Ahaz's day, what is going to take place? Assuming that were to happen, verse 16 identifies the aspect of the sign that served to confirm God's promise to Ahaz in verse 7. So, Isaiah is not saying Immanuel will be born after 700 years. Isaiah is saying, there is, the sign is given to house of Judah, Israel, house of Judah. Child will be born. Isaiah doesn't say when he is going to be born. Child is going to be born. He is going to be Immanuel. Provided that if the child is born that time during the Ahaz day, that is, if Jesus was born in Ahaz day, then this is what's going to happen. Verse 15 and 16, that's what it says. So, Specifically, the second part of the sign was designed the period of time between the birth of a child and age at which a child would be capable of moral discernment. All three mentioned a period of time as a prophetic sign. Whether the time period is in view is to be taken as 2, 3 years or 12, 13 years, like the time of maturity, the intent is roughly the same. Before the designated time elapsed, the two kings threatening Ahaz would be destroyed. Right? We don't know, is it 2 years or 13 years? But before the designated time elapsed, two kings, Ahaz, would be destroyed. If the reference is to 2 or 3 years, then the promise refers specifically to the death of Rezin and Pekah, because within 2 or 3 years, Pekah and Rezin died, or they were deposed in 732 BC. Isaiah 8:4 could be taken to support this interpretation. But maturity in terms of 12, 13 years, then the promise entailed the destruction of the respective kingdoms represented by these two kings, that Assyria came, invaded Syria, overthrew them in 732 BC, and the northern kingdom 722 BC. Isaiah 7:16 appears to argue for this interpretation. Maybe this is the right interpretation. In either case, this sign has a direct application to Ahaz and would serve to confirm God's promised deliverance in 7:7. It may be added that prophecy in Isaiah 8:1-14 is a prior prophecy and serves to confirm the second part of Immanuel prophecy. All right, so what did you understand, friends? Isaiah is prophesying a sign, right? Sign. He's talking about a sign. And he says, there is a sign is going to be given to Davidic line. Immanuel is going to be born. And Isaiah says, it could be born today. If it is born today, this is what's going to happen. If it is born today, this is what's going to happen. So the sign is given to Davidic line, right? Because Immanuel is going to be there. Son is going to be there to rule Judah. So by looking at Isaiah's prophecy, Matthew now, yes, of course, son is given. Isaiah doesn't say when it is going to be, but if the son is born, this is going to happen. So by looking at that, Matthew learned that what Isaiah prophesied about a virgin son, the sign for Israel, the sign for Davidic line, that son is Jesus Christ. And Matthew is bringing that prophecy into Jesus. And that is what happened. Of course, it is sign. So let me say one more time. In the context of the sign, Isaiah declared what would take place if the child born in Ahaz's day. Assuming that it were to happen, verse 16 says, this is what would happen within few years, actually within 13 years. The moment if the son is going to be born today, within 13 years, Syria and Israel will be destroyed within 13 years. But the question is, was there a son like that? Yes, son was not born that day. Why? Because the sign was given to Davidic line, not simply for Ahaz. And therefore, the son was born only after 700 years. And for sure, as Isaiah said to Ahaz, you don't have to worry. God will take care, and God took care the problem of Syria and Israel in Isaiah's day. So that is what happened here. about Isaiah's prophecy. All right.